Welcome to I.T.S. ABA Supervision ACE events. I.T.S. provides supervision services and ACE events for candidates and certificates for supervisors from around the world. This event is eligible for one CEU in the general category. The event is library number 3 and entitled How to Run an Effective ACE Event. There will be 3 phrases embedded in the event. At the end of the event, to receive your event CEUs, submit the credit form with your information and code words. You will receive an email with your certificate. My name is Katie, and I will be hosting today's event. I have 3 years of experience in ABA and as a BCBA. I primarily work as an early interventionist in a school system in Louisiana. I have been supervising candidates for 3 years as well. I received my own BCBA supervision through the company years ago. And with that being said, we are ready to get started. Just so you know, this video is property of I.T.S. ABA Supervision, and it should not be copied, shared, or distributed without the organization's explicit written permission first. Again, this event is titled How to Run an Effective ACE, and it is for one general CEU. The objectives for today are that by the end of this presentation, participants will be able to state requirements for hosting a teaching CEU and identify strategies for speaking professionally. We have 3 items on our agenda. The first is to discuss ACE handbook requirements. We will briefly review these. However, we will not go through all of the procedures to getting your ACE certification, for example. So I highly suggest that if you are interested in becoming an individual ACE provider or an organization ACE provider, that you refer to the ACE handbook that is referenced throughout this event. We will also discuss I.T.S. ACE event requirements and provide ideas for outside organizations. And finally, we'll share strategies to enhance public speaking skills. Here's some general ACE handbook information. ACE stands for Authorized Continuing Education. ACE events are for BCABAs and BCBAs. Topics of ACE events should include more than basic ABA information. Remember that when someone has become a BCBA or BCBA or BCABA, they have proven through the rigorous application method that they have entry-level skills that are required for these positions. So we don't need to review very basic skills. What we want to do is build upon them. And again, this is for application into different settings. I want to emphasize that as well. It should not be simply providing information for information's sake. There should be an application component to it. Topics could include, but are not limited to, article reviews on various ABA topics, supervision, and ethics. And here I have a quote from the ACE handbook on the BACB's website. Learning CE content must cover material that goes beyond the current BCBA task list and BCABA task list, be behavior analytic in nature, be designed for attendees with a behavior analytic background, and reflect current and accurate content. Here's some more information about CE content requirements. In order for it to be behavior analytic in nature, the majority of a CE learning event must cover content that is behavior analytic in nature. For example, an event covering the characteristics and diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder is not appropriate for learning CEs. However, an event covering techniques for safely conducting functional assessments of stereotypic behavior is appropriate. So again, that's just really emphasizing that it needs to be based on evidence-based practices. Make sure that you are reading up-to-date scholarly articles so that you know that you are presenting the most current information. Audience. The Learning CE event should be designed for professional behavior analysis who have already earned a bachelor's level, BCABA, or master's level, BCBA, coursework in behavior analysis. Events designed for other audiences, such as parents or professionals from other disciplines, should not be offered for learning CE. Up-to-date content. ACE providers should make every effort to ensure that the content of all CE events is accurate and up to date. I actually already touched base on this a little bit with the first point. For example, it represents best available scientific evidence, is focused on current best practices in behavior analysis, is consistent with current local laws, regulations, policies, and ethical standards. And all of this I took, again, directly from that ACE handbook on the BACB's website. More considerations when you're creating your teaching event. 25 minutes of presentation accounts for half of a CEU. 50 minutes of a presentation accounts for one CEU. Continue to increase the number of CEUs by 1/2 for every additional 25 minutes. Rounding up is not permitted. They are very clear about this in the handbook. Therefore, if you record a 49-minute event, it counts as half of a CEU. You have to get it up to that 50 minutes. Now, let's say you're at 47 minutes or something like that, and you want this CEU to count as one CEU and not half. Here are some ideas that you could use to increase that duration. Provide a real-life example, perhaps from your own practice. Explain any potential misconceptions. So if when you are creating the event, if you foresee that people may have questions about a certain concept, then you could go ahead and answer it ahead of time in your recording. Or if it's a live event, you can ask for participants to give questions, and that can make up for some time as well. And then also clarify some misconceptions that you didn't plan for. So really, that's a win-win situation. Events must be monitored for participation. The BACB gives some suggestions, and some of them include quizzes, embedding code words or phrases throughout a recording, sign in or sign out sheets. You can get creative with it, but you do have to have some way that you can prove that the attendees participated in your event. Participants who join the event must have a way to provide feedback. Now with I.T.S, after the participants view the events, whether they be synchronous or asynchronous, they do have the option to complete a survey afterwards to include any ideas for improvement or things that they found really beneficial from the presentation. So we know what we have to change and what things that we should continue to do. Code phrase 1 is ice cream. It's up here on the screen, but if you need it spelled out for you, it's ICE space cream, CREAM, ice cream. And I will pause right here just to see if we have any questions in the chat. Mary, would you mind checking the chat to see if there are any questions that have been asked? I cannot pull it up.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Were you able to find any questions so far or comments?
Can't see the chat either.
Okay, well then we will answer all of the questions at the end.
Okay. Okay, I just pulled it up. No questions.
Thank you. Okay, so as I stated before, there are 3 different types of CEUs. It includes general, ethics, and supervision CEUs. Here are the guidelines straight from the ACE handbook regarding the ethics CEUs. BCBA and BCABA certificates are required to obtain at least 4 continuing education units, CEUs, covering ethics content in every recertification cycle. Acceptable ethics content must cover ethical issues in behavior analytic practice or research. Ethics content should relate to the BACB's ethic requirements. So you can pull up the ethics code. You can read articles regarding ethics. There are a ton of scholarly resources out there. to read up on and get current information. We actually our first ethics CEU event was regarding trauma-informed care, and that was how to ensure that we were providing appropriate care for those who may or may not have experienced trauma and avoid re-traumatization. Other examples of ethics content include the considerations for implementing non-behavioral therapies, strategies for avoiding managing dual relationships, creating a culture of ethics in an organization, ethical implications of media and technology, among many other types. All right, another category is supervision CEUs. Supervisors are required to obtain 3 CEUs on supervision in every recertification cycle. Acceptable supervision content must, again, be behavior analytic in nature and cover effective supervision as described in the Supervisor Training Curriculum Outline 2.0. Now, when they come out with another version, it will be perhaps 3.0. That's again why we have to make sure that all of our information is up to date and we're regularly checking the BACB's website and our emails and the newsletters that they send out. Teaching events. So the general CEs, which I didn't include in here, but I'll just briefly describe. General CEs are anything that's behavior analytic in nature that does not fall under ethics or supervision. So this could be possible interventions to use for different behaviors and things like that. Anything that is behavior analytic can be a general CE if it doesn't fall under ethics or supervision. Now, this is why a lot of us are here, teaching events. So you may receive teaching CEs for one instance of delivery on a behavior analytic topic. For example, if you record a 25-minute CEU on ethics, you will earn 0.5 CEUs for the preparation and recording of that event. Now, what they mean by one instance of delivery is, let's say that you take the time and you are presenting this 25-minute CEU event on ethics, but you present it multiple times, you will only receive the half CEU for the first time that you present it. So even if you go and present to different groups of BCBAs or BCABAs, it's only the first event that counts. You can't get 2 hours if you go and present it to 4 different groups of BCBAs. CE documentation. Documentation of learning CE must be issued to the participant within 45 days of the event and must include the following information. So this is after the participants attend your event. These are all of the things that have to be documented. For people who work at I.T.S, this will be in the form that our participants complete after they attend your event or watch it after the recording. So therefore, if you are a teacher for an ACE event with I.T.S, you don't have to worry about this component because that will come on the organization's end, but I do still want to present the information. You need to have the participant's name and BACB certification number, the ACE provider's name and provider number, the ACE coordinator name if it's an organization provider, the title of the event. Note, multi-presentation conferences must include the title of each session attended by the certificate, instructor's name, event date or dates, event modality, for example, in person, online synchronous, online asynchronous, the number of learning CEUs, the number of CEUs applicable to the ethics and supervision categories. Documentation for CE teachers. ACE providers must also provide a letter for instructors who request it for teaching CE purposes. So that means that if you are teaching an event or you elect to teach an event, the organization provider, which for us would be I.T.S ABA Supervision, would come from the organization's end. You'll receive a letter for leading an event. And so whether that event is 25 minutes or an hour, you will receive the appropriate amount of CEUs for teaching that event. And the letter will contain the same information that was required for the certificates of completion for participants. So everything that was on that previous slide, as well as the event instructor's name and certification number. So that will be your name and your certification number. And of course, we could be audited at any time. So we do need documentation for the BACB. ACE providers must maintain records demonstrating that they are meeting the requirements outlined in the handbook, which may include a combination of the following: a summary of all events offered, event syllabi and/or the presentation materials, evidence of instructor qualifications, copies of attendance records, description of event monitoring procedures, copy of certificates awarded to the attendees, event feedback, and any marketing materials that were used to promote the event. Okay, code word 2 is flying car. That's FLYING space CAR, flying car. To continue, I.T.S, our organization, has requirements for organizing an ACE event. And we would like to provide these ideas for other organizations to adapt to their own practices and procedures. So if you do work for I.T.S, step 1 is that you have generated an idea and you decide that this would be a really great ACE event. You think people would get a lot out of it. It would affect their future practices. When this happens, you are required to fill out a form that is due by the 5th of each month. And after attending this event and submitting the code words, you will have access to this form and you will be able to submit your ideas with the following information. I'm just going to pull it up so you can see what it looks like. All right, here is our Google form. We have the instructor's name. Excuse me, I should have put a comma there. Pardon my typo. Your BCAB identification number, your BACB certification number. Under here, your co-instructors' names, BACB numbers, and certification numbers should be included. Please separate it with a comma. For the event coordinator, please just type in Jennifer Martin. She is our ACE coordinator. Your event title, so whatever you decide should be the event title, please put that there. Please include the event objective or objectives. Therefore, whatever you want participants to be able to dictate back at the end or be able to apply to their own practices, you will include this in the event objective. The event syllabus. What you need to do here is simply type out the discussion points. It doesn't have to be long. For example, for our ethics ACE event on trauma-informed care, we just have the presenter introduction, the objectives, the rationale for trauma-informed care, and the components of trauma-informed care. In addition to that, we would also like to know if it is a live event with recording or an asynchronous event. So perhaps it's one that you record whenever you have an opportunity and you're going to send it out. If it's live with a recording, keep in mind that even if you're presenting in real time, we do still want you to record it, because with everyone's busy schedule, there will likely be many people who want to participate and earn those CEUs in various topics after you have finished with the event. And then our attendance monitoring. At I.T.S, we include code phrases, as you have probably picked up on, to monitor our attendance and participation in these events. So I'm asking that when you are planning to create this ACE event, and you're going to teach it, you type in the 3 code phrases or code words that will be embedded in your video. A tip that I have here is some ideas are to type them into the slides, as I have done with this presentation. If you are not using a PowerPoint, which you're not required to, if you're presenting in some sort of different manner, just please make sure that the code words are clear and easy to hear, not something that might be really difficult to spell. We don't want to trick people. We just want to ensure that they have attended the event. Sometimes it might help to spell out a word for everyone, like a spelling bee, as I've been doing here. I state the code phrase, I spell it out, and then I repeat the code phrase again. And what I really like about Google Forms, and this is why I would suggest that other organizations consider implementing this, is that all of this information with Google Forms, you can actually have it, once everyone fills it out, the responses go into a Google Sheet. And so if you are ever audited, you have all of that information right there in that Google Sheet for you, and it's readily available to you if you ever need to reference back at it, or in the event of an audit, you need to submit it to the board. Okay, step 2 would be to wait for a response from the ACE coordinator approving your idea or offering other suggestions to improve the content. So again, after you submitted that idea by the 5th, you need to wait for a response from myself or Jen, and we will tell you, oh, go ahead, this sounds like a great opportunity. Or we might say, oh, could you consider adding this information to your event? The reason that we ask that it be completed by the 5th of the month, and other organizations, again, may want to consider this if you're tuning into this event, is for budgeting reasons. We do pay our CE teachers for hosting these events because we know that they're a lot of work and there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. And we need to budget for each month. So if one month we have 10 people who want to lead an ACE event, that's going to add up quite quickly. And what we really need to do at the beginning of each month is determine which events we are going to hold for that month. Now, let's say we get 5 or 6 ideas at the beginning of the month. It could also be a scenario where we ask for some people to hold off until next month so that we can budget appropriately, etc. And with this, we will also be a little more organized. I can give you an event number. We do record, okay, this is number 1 in the library, this is number 2 in our ACE library. It just helps keep us organized and on top of things. And after all of that, so let's say you get the go ahead, we kindly request that you record the event within 2 months of approval. Again, we know that this is a lot of work, a lot of effort, so we want to give you the appropriate amount of time to complete the event and to record it. But we understand that people also are contributing to the library, and that they also may want to record their own ACE events, so we don't want everything to get backed up. So that's why we give you the 2 months. Also, please be sure to use the opening and closing script, which I will show you on the following page. And again, just to reiterate what I've previously stated, we recommend that all organizations develop some form of mainstreaming ACE event processes to keep everything organized. Here is the intro script and the disclosure. You have heard me say it in the beginning, but I will read it again. Hello, and welcome to I.T.S. ABA Supervision ACE events. I.T.S. provides supervision services and ACE events for candidates and supervisors from around the world. This event is eligible for blank CEUs in the blank category. So that's where you would say general category, ethics category, or supervision category. This event is library number blank and titled blank. There will be 3 phrases embedded in the event. At the end of the event, to receive your event CEUs, submit the credit form with your information and code words. You will receive an email with your certificate. My name is blank, and I will be hosting today's event with blank co-hosting. Now, of course, if you don't have someone co-hosting with you, you wouldn't read that part. I have been a BCBA for blank years and have expertise in blank areas. I have been supervising candidates with I.T.S for blank years. I also received my own BCBA supervision through the company years ago. If this pertains to you, perhaps you did not receive it through I.T.S, but you work with us now. So you wouldn't say that if you don't work for, or if you didn't receive your supervision through our company. And then if you have a co-host, this would be the opportunity for the co-host to introduce themselves. So you would say, please tell the participants about your experience before we dive into the content. This is where the co-host would speak. They would say, my name is blank. I've been a BCBA for blank years and have expertise in blank areas. I have been supervising candidates with I.T.S for blank years. I also received my own BCBA supervision through the company years ago. And then we go back to host, and we want to make it clear that the video is our property. We don't want it being copied and distributed if people have not paid for the content. So we just say, the video is property of I.T.S ABA supervision, and it should not be copied, shared, or distributed without the organization's explicit written permission first. And one thing I would like to point out before we move on is that there is a small typo in here. It does say certificates from around the world, but it should say supervisor or BCBAs from around the world. We provide supervision services for candidates, and then we also provide ACE events for BCBAs and other BCABAs and supervisors as well. And then when you're finished the script, and you'll hear me say this again later, thank you for listening to I.T.S's ACE event on blank. Please be sure to fill out the form to obtain your CEUs and use us for all of your CEU needs. Okay, now that we have gone over some of the ACE handbook requirements, and we have also spoken about how our organization runs ACE events, what goes into it, what the pre-planning steps are, I'm going to review some different ideas on how to speak professionally, because if we're running ACE events or hosting them, we want to sound like we know what we're talking about. We want to make sure that our content is being delivered clearly without the use of filler words or long pauses, etc. So keep in mind, number one, that it is crucial to speak professionally as a BCBA, especially when presenting new information to clients, their families, the general public, and other professionals. This also applies to ACE events. Start with the end goal or objective. What do you want people to be able to apply at the conclusion of your event? So before you even get into the planning of it or start creating those slides, what you really want to think about is, what do I want everyone to leave this ACE event having the skills to perform or obtain? Once you have that objective or end goal in mind, you can create that agenda that maps out how you will reach that objective. So again, creating that end goal will help you plan out the different things or topics that you want to discuss or present throughout your event. Information that is presented should be scripted in some sort of way. So this could be a slideshow like the one that I'm presenting now. It could be your own personal notes, whatever strategy works for you, but there should be some sort of planning and something that you can reference as you are speaking, so your presentation can be fluent and succinct. Having a clear, concise objective and agenda will provide you with a visual prompt to stay on topic. Again, if you don't have a plan or you don't have that visual prompt or whatever works for you when you are a presenter, there's a higher risk of you going off on a tangent. You might forget what you want to say. You might leave out some valuable information. Additional notes and/or slides provide a visual prompt on what to say. I apologize, I'm repeating some things that I've already stated. However, again, this reduces a tendency to also use filler words such as you know, like, tongue clicks, and long pauses. It also reduces the likelihood that you will present incorrect information or leave something out. Here's a strategy from an article that I found that I think is very useful, so I'd like to pass this information along to you. Using habit reversal to reduce speech disfluencies. In their article, Reducing Speech Disfluencies During Public Speaking Using Brief Habit Reversal, Brittany Pollock and Christopher J. Perrin replicate previous studies on awareness training and competing responses. Please see the full citation for the article at the end of this presentation. The authors replicate publications by Mancuso and Miltenberger and Spieler and Miltenberger on the same procedures. Awareness training and competing response training are interventions designed to reduce speech disfluencies during public speaking events. For example, ACE events. They identify 3 forms of speech disfluencies: filled pauses in between the words that you use, tongue clicks, like, or it would likely be more subtle than that, but just to give you an example, and the inappropriate use of the word like. So you use the word like in its traditional form to describe something that you enjoy. I like ice cream, not to describe, I was like blank. I was like, oh, I can't believe that happened to me today, would be an inappropriate use of the word like. Components of awareness training. Create speaking point notes that work for you. Again, writing a script, creating a PowerPoint presentation, etc. It really has to work for you, so I can't dictate what you find helpful. Record yourself speaking about the topic for 3 to 5 minutes. Again, this is something that's very quick. I don't want people to have to spend copious amounts of time rehearsing or going through an entire ACE event and then re-recording it again. If you don't have to, if you feel comfortable and prepared, I think 3 to 5 minutes could help reduce those filler words or other speech disfluencies. And in the article, the participants who were college students practiced public speaking for 3 to 5 minutes. After you record yourself, you can watch or listen to the recording. And as you watch, you raise your hand or notate the use of filled pauses, tongue clicks, and/or inappropriate uses of the word like. You could even perhaps create a table with 3 columns and notate which, when you hear perhaps a filled pause, you might put a tally mark under the filled pause column. If you hear a tongue click, you would put a tally there, or for inappropriate use of like. And then that will give you the ability to analyze which type of speech disfluency you use most frequently. For example, I know from recording myself and listening to myself speak, I have the tendency to use filled pauses, and I've probably done it a few times throughout this video. In fact, I have used awareness training myself, and I've identified a few places where I did use some filled pauses. Once you know or have data to support this is where I'm making the most speech disfluencies, then you are more likely to be aware of them in the future. After you finish listening to that 3 to 5 minute recording of yourself, you can practice speaking again on the same topic for 3 to 5 minutes. But this time, instead of watching a recording after or listening to a recording after, you raise your hand as you notice the speech disfluency. For example, if I was talking about unicorns and I prepared my speech, or I was using a PowerPoint presentation and maybe I'm going to speak somewhere, at some sort of convention about unicorns. I know this is a very silly example, but I practice speaking based off my PowerPoint and I record myself and I notice I say like a bunch of times in an inappropriate way. When I am practicing speaking without the recording, every time I might say, unicorns are the best. Like when they fly in the sky, or like when they use their horn to go over rainbows. So again, I know that's an absurd example, but I would raise my hand both instances when I use that word like in an inappropriate manner. So that way you're taking it from, okay, I'm watching the recording and now I'm noticing that I have done this in the past, and you're moving to generalize this skill by actually identifying it as you are speaking. Another alteration I've heard of is using a snap band, such as like a rubber band or a hair tie on your wrist when you identify that a speech disfluency is used. I've had a candidate in the past who kept a rubber band on her wrist, and every time she would practice speaking professionally and she noticed that she was using one of these filler words, for example, she would snap the band on her very gently, not to hurt herself, but she would snap it just so that she was giving herself that's prompt. Oh, I am using a filler word. And I don't know about you all who are participating in this presentation, but for me, when I begin to use some of these speech disfluencies, if I don't identify it, they kind of snowball off of each other. So if I use the filler word once or twice, and then I don't identify that I'm doing it, I might begin using it more often. Whereas if I identify it in some sort of way, then I can reflect on it and try to use a different strategy to reduce the use of those filler words in the future. And one of the strategies, as described in this article, is a competing response. The article didn't state this, but I think that it's beneficial to identify triggers that may cause a speech disfluency. So you typically know yourself best. For example, you might lose your place in your notes. Maybe you're asked a question by another presenter or participant that kind of throws you off guard. You might hear an unexpected noise. This is when you would use a competing response to replace a speech disfluency. If you are using a rubber band or hair tie on your wrist to detect speech disfluencies as you present, it will prompt you to use a competing response, as I stated before. Sometimes I jump a little bit ahead of myself and the information is on the next slide or at the bottom of the slide. Additionally, a competing response, as described in the article, is taking a 3-second pause. So if you have identified that you are using these speech disfluencies, you can take a moment to reflect and tell yourself to take a 3-second pause. For me, the way that this works is I tell myself to take a deep breath really quick. Perhaps I count to 3 in my head to get myself refocused as perhaps I've lost my place in my notes. And instead of frantically using filler words to kill the time, I might count to 3 in my head while I'm searching for the place where I left off in my notes. And again, just to reiterate, I hope that these are just some strategies to help you as a presenter speak more fluently and give your information in an organized fashion so that other people who attend your event can understand what you're saying and apply it in different settings. And yes, I did notice that I just used the word This takes us to ideas for hosting and co-hosting an event. It might be beneficial to have your participants type questions into the chat box, and you can answer those questions when the code phrases are announced. That way, what I like about using the code phrases as an opportunity to also answer questions is that tends to be a natural pause in the presentation. So that's a good opportunity for you to stop, take a break, maybe take a few deep breaths yourself, and go to answer some questions. If you are co-hosting an event with someone else, there are some different ways that you could go about it. You could have one person lead and another person help present your Learning CE event. So perhaps, let's say you really took the lead on an ACE event that you've created. You could ask someone to, perhaps, maybe you've done all the research, you could ask another BCBA to go back and look at your information, make sure that everything is succinct and flows nicely in your presentation, and then they can join you when you present the information. They might be able to chime in with something that you forgot or answer questions as they come up in the chat. Maybe they help you move the slides along, whatever works for you, but you are still the one who's leading the event. And so it's more like one leads and one assists. Now, I've done some events in the past where we have two people who are presenting, two BCBAs who are presenting the event, but ahead of time, we do consider who will say what at each time throughout the event. So if I am leading one aspect, then my co-host will lead the other aspect. And of course, again, we'll chime in to help each other out if we need to, but it can be very beneficial to have two people take the lead on an ACE event. Of course, it cuts down on your work. You get a break from talking every now and then, which gives you an opportunity to grab some water if you need to. However, you really need to, in this case, thoughtfully plan out where each person's role in hosting that event, because you don't want to cut each other off or present conflicting information. And you also don't want to have that pause in the event where no one speaks because they assume that someone else is going to cover a topic. Okay, code word or code phrase number 3 is rubber ducky. That's RUBBERDUCKY, rubber ducky. And I'm going to take this opportunity, because we are finished with the slideshow, to answer a question or comment in the chat. Okay, Jennifer Martin has said, the content is great. Thank you, Katie. Since we are an evidence-based practice, I enjoyed hearing research about this content in the presentation today. So important in the field application and also when providing ACE events. I also enjoyed the behavior analytic techniques recommended for behavior change to help speakers. Thank you so much for your compliment, Jen. That really makes me feel very accomplished after presenting today. And at this time, I'd like to give any of our other participants an opportunity to unmute themselves, ask some questions. If you have any queries about how to move forward, any comments at all, maybe you have a thought that could be helpful to other people who might plan out a teaching event in the future. I welcome all of these comments if you have them. All right, thank you. Yes, Jen, I see that your comment. I did state in the slideshow that I will provide the resources that I use. So the two resources I used were the article that I discussed in this presentation, and also the ACE handbook, which I quoted several times in the beginning of the presentation, because no one says it better than the board sometimes. I did not get an opportunity to put it directly in the slide, but it will be when you go into the ACE event, you will be able to access that article. So don't worry. Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you, Jen. So they said that they think that's a great idea, and I appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts on the use of awareness training or competing responses? I'd love to hear any comments on that while we have a few moments left. And you can unmute yourself. Please feel free.
So I have used that before, and I definitely am aware that I say a lot for one. And it's mostly when I'm speaking publicly. I don't usually say so I find that strange that I do it when I'm speaking in a group.
Oh, so why do you think that is? If you don't mind.
I don't know. I was about to say it again, actually.
Yes. Perhaps I know for me that when I'm presenting, especially when I'm recording myself and it's only me talking and I don't actually see people, and I understand this is a mentalistic term, but I actually I I feel my anxiety increase slightly. And I think it's because I'm not able to see people's facial expressions when I'm recording myself on the screen. So a lot of times if I have my PowerPoint presentation up, I'm not scanning the room to see people nodding or reinforcing my speech in some sort of other way. So that makes it more likely occasionally that I will use a filler word. And I also am guilty of using and I say a lot when I'm trying to figure out what to say next in my head.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's probably similar for me too.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I have something else in the chat. Jen says, yes, I love these techniques. Something I will definitely practice since I'm guilty of and like. It will help me bridge my thoughts. I will try to use the breathing technique as a regroup instead of Yes, and in that article, I found it very useful that they suggested that 3-second pause. But something I forgot to mention that I had reflected on earlier today was taking a 3-second pause in some ways doesn't pass that dead man's test because a dead man can pause technically or not say anything for 3 seconds. So for me, it's a little more helpful to think of it as I'm going to replace my filler words with a breath or by doing something else. So instead of stopping talking, I am going to breathe in and breathe out, or perhaps count to 3 in my head. Maybe I do something with my fingers where no one else can see them to help me regroup or count down or some sort of strategy like that.
Yes, I think taking a drink helps a lot too.
Yes, taking a drink does help a lot. That's another good strategy, taking a pause to get a sip of water. And there were a few times throughout this presentation because I did not drink any water, but I did feel my mouth get a little dry. So that's another really great replacement strategy or competing response for those filler words. All right, with that being said, I would like to thank everyone for joining our event today on how to present an ACE event effectively. Please do not forget to complete your form so that you can receive your 1 general CE for this event. And we also look forward to your feedback on how this presentation went, what you found valuable, what you would like to see in the future. Of course, we take that all into account when we're planning our events, and we will share that information with our other CE teachers when they plan out their events in order for them to apply it to their CE events that you will hopefully attend. All right. And again, I am Katie Borowski, and it was my pleasure to have this event with you all today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. This is a citation of the article that we reference throughout this ACE event.